Make up your own mind about Andrew Tate. Here it is. So what are you charged with?
That's a really good question. I'm charged with being the head of an organized criminal group, which is in charge of recruiting girls to make TikTok videos to steal the money from the TikTok views.
Recruiting girls to make TikTok videos and stealing the money. So it's really a financial crime?
It looks that way, and it's very interesting because the girls who they've identified to add to the file are saying that we're not victims of anything and this isn't true. But the state believes it's true, and the state thinks that I, as a 35-year-old man, woke up. I was already extremely financially successful. I was already a father. I was already very well known. I had no financial motivation. I have no criminal record. It's not my personality profile, but I woke up at the age of 35 and decided to make girls do TikTok to enrich myself with the pennies that I would earn from TikTok views.
So in the United States, I think the belief is that you were charged with human trafficking.
Yeah, that's human trafficking because what you do is you force a girl to work against her will for financial gain. That's human trafficking. And their justification for this is that girls do TikTok. Some girls I know who they've found who say they're not victims have TikTok accounts.
How do you force someone to do TikTok videos?
I guess the prosecutor is going to have to explain that, isn't he? It's a very interesting scenario I'm in, and I'm inside of Romania, so I have to show a degree of respect to the Romanian judicial system, and I have to show a degree of respect to the situation I'm in, but the overall charge is that there's an organized criminal group. There's a group of us. I'm the head of it. My brother is below me, and we use the lover boy method to convince women to do TikTok videos to make money so that we can steal the TikTok money.
So there's just to be clear, you are not accused of pandering, of pimping, of forcing women to have sex with anybody.
No, not forcing them to have sex, not restraining their movement, not stopping them from living a full life, but the fact that we are somehow convincing them to have TikTok. Very interesting. I don't think...
But there's no actual... I'm asking you this because I do think it's a widespread belief that you were accused of pimping.
Yeah, no, that's nothing to do with any of this case. Absolutely nothing. And it's kind of scary because the crime in itself of human trafficking is a unique one because they can ignore the statement of the victim. So the girls have come forward and said, this is insane. You've just picked us because we're near Andrew and we're his friends. But the whole idea of the crime is they can say that she's brainwashed, right? She's under duress. So you can ignore her statement. State says she's a victim regardless of the fact that she says she's not a victim. So it's very interesting because the difference between sex and rape is consent, right?
Right.
But they remove all of that. They're like, nope, you're a victim. No matter what you say, we're deciding you're a victim. And they've chosen them. And of course, these girls do nothing pornographic. They've never had sex with anyone, nothing to do with that. So they've picked TikTok. So it's scary. Imagine you're a full-grown man anywhere in the world today. They can find two girls who have TikTok on their phone, which is every single female on the planet, and they can accuse you of forcing them to take the TikTok money, and even if the girls say they didn't do that, this isn't true, then you're still a human trafficker.
But force, what does that consist of? Forcing someone to do something? Are they accusing you of using violence or?
No, they're accusing me, and this is the thing, they're accusing me of using the lover boy method, coercing them by being nice.
And by the way, these charges presumably are public, so...
They're public, and this is extremely serious, but if you actually analyze the overall case against me, they're saying that Andrew and his brother, by being nice men, convinced girls to have TikTok accounts and then take the money. And it's very interesting because inside of the entire case file, there's not a single financial transaction to us for money.
What are the penalties?
They're extremely severe, 5 to 10 years in jail. And I've already served, coming up now, 7 months in a form of jail. They can only hold
So you are essentially incarcerated right now?
Absolutely, I'm on house arrest. And that counts as jail. You can only be held 6 months without charge. I was initially picked up, thrown in a cell without charge. And I think the intention of the entire investigation at that point was to find the crime because they had very, very weak evidence. They contacted 2,000 people who know me or knew me. They tried very hard to convince some female somewhere to come forward and say something bad about me. The media machine, which works hands in hands with the justice machine, as you know very well, did exactly that. In fact, they offered bribes effectively. They'd call up ex-girlfriends and say, if you have anything bad to say about Andrew, we can pay you $50,000 for the story. And they tried very hard. They didn't find any evidence of anything. They then released me on house arrest. And then 2 days before the legal limit in which they had to drop everything, they charged me with whatever they had from the beginning, which is very little. And now we have to wait for the Romanian judicial system to analyze the file and, God willing, throw it away.
How long did you spend in jail?
I was in jail for 92 days.
I think most people, just speaking from the American perspective, most people believe that human trafficking is effectively slavery, selling human beings.
That's what I believe as well. Absolutely. And this is the thing that's so interesting. When you finally end up the enemy of the matrix and they use the legal system as a weapon to punish you for having an opinion, you realize how subjective the law is, right? Because it can be a weapon. When you have something subjective, you can just pick and choose. So if they sit and say, human trafficking is a woman doing something for financial gain against her will via emotional coercion. Well, he knows these two girls, they have TikTok accounts.
Emotional coercion?
Convincing her. That's what I'm accused of, because they have no proof of me doing anything wrong. So they said, he's convinced these girls to do TikTok for money. The girls have said this is not true, and the state is denying their statement, saying, no, you're brainwashed, it is true. And I went to jail.
So how is the state, so the state is trying to coerce the women, so how is the state not committing human trafficking by the same definition?
Well, absolutely. It's very interesting. It's very interesting that you can sit someone down and tell them they're a victim when they say they're not a victim.
You're a victim of being coerced, and we're going to try to coerce you into conceding you were coerced.
Exactly. It's a very interesting scenario. And
okay.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting scenario. And it's up until this point, no judge has looked at the evidence of the case. So up until this point, I've been to court a bunch of times. But the only reason I was in court was to discuss my preventative detention. So under Romanian law, if you being free can impede the investigation, you should stay in jail. So the judge agreed that, yeah, maybe if he's free, he can damage this investigation because they're trying very hard to get something on this guy. So I've done a bunch of jail time. And now it just begins. The judge is going to look at the case. And like I said, God willing, I still have enough faith in the Romanian judicial system that she's going to look at this and go, this is not a crime. To come across as a conspiracy theorist, Tucker, but I kind of have a feeling that this might be something to do with my influence and an attempt to slander my name. Perhaps I'm crazy. But the fact that they chose such a heinous crime and they reported it so heavily and they won't shut up and keep repeating basically a slander attack day after day after day. Also considering the fact that other people who genuinely commit heinous crimes have far more favorable press coverage. I don't want you to think I'm a conspiracy theorist. Please, Tucker, I would hate for you to come here and call me crazy. Yeah. But something very strange about it, and I think
What, when Jeffrey Epstein's friends call you immoral?
Yeah. The goal of it is certainly to slander my name, and I like to see it as a litmus test. I like to see it as an intelligence test. Anybody who wakes up and looks at me and goes, he's a human trafficker because of TikTok, they're fully gone.
So what is it about your message, do you think, that infuriates certain people?
Well, my message is traditional masculinity. My message is to stand up and say what you mean and mean what you say. And even going to the gym nowadays is an act of defiance, because when you have a man who's built with any degree of principle, you say no to things. And I think if I have to analyze my message and why I'm so disliked by the people who dislike me, it's not the things I'm saying, it's the fact that if you adhere to my principles and you adhere to the things I say, you end up being the kind of person who will resist certain ideas. You say no. What kind of man never says no? Name a man who never says no. Men say no, right? Men wake up and say, no, I don't think that should be done this way. No, my children will not be taught that.
It's
no.
the father's primary job.
Absolutely. So when you say to men, listen, you're allowed to have an opinion. You're allowed to have standards. You're allowed to have boundaries and barriers. You're allowed to get up and become important and work hard and try hard and become the kind of man who can't be controlled, then you're seen as an enemy. And especially with the massive influence I've gained, I think they look at me and go, he's helping men resist the slave programming. We don't need him around. We need to empty their brains so we can inject the slave programming and convince men to be eunuchs, because once you're eunuched, then you're not a threat.
I think I buy that, because your message, I'm not the world's expert on your message, but I've seen a lot of it, and it's not explicitly political, actually.
No, it's not political at all. And their original attack before this Matrix attack is they weaponized virtue, which is what they usually do. There's no genuine virtue inside of these people. They weaponize virtue. They find a virtue and they turn it into a bullet and they shoot at you. I'm sure you know very well.
Yeah, I've heard.
Yeah. I was a misogynist for the longest time just for saying that men should have standards. If you tell a man he can have standards in a relationship in any way, you're a misogynist. It's actually very interesting because
what does that mean to have standards in a relationship?
But this is the thing that's so interesting about it, because they've gendered the argument when I never did. I said as a man, you shouldn't have a girlfriend who is a liar and a cheater. And you also shouldn't have male friends who are liars and cheaters. You shouldn't be around dishonest people,
yes,
male or female.
Amen.
And they gendered it and said, he's a misogynist. He's saying that men should only act this way with women, etc. I said that men should have standards and you should have protocols that you're prepared to accept and you should have hard parameters. And if a woman doesn't want to adhere to those parameters, that's her decision and it's her prerogative, but you don't have to stay with her. Why should you?
What's wrong with that?
Well, that's teaching men to say no. They don't want men to say no.
So are you arguing that it's better to be with a virtuous woman?
I think so, yes. I know that's crazy.
No, I'm serious. I mean, that seems
I
like
am, Tucker. I don't want to.
That seems like good advice.
I don't want to come across as extreme, but yes, I am. And what's actually funny is I really believe most of the things I'm saying were accepted by absolutely everybody 15 years ago, 10 years ago. And now it's public enemy number one. And it's because of the mass influence I have. At one point, I became the most Googled man on earth. At one point. And it's a scary situation I'm in.
But if you're arguing that it's really important for a man to find a good woman, a decent woman, an honest woman, that's the truest thing that's ever been said. I
Absolutely.
mean, that's the most important thing any man can do. I mean, I can just tell you firsthand.
Oh, thank you very much.
Married 32 years, that's the most important thing. And you think saying that angered people?
Absolutely, because I'm arguing the only way to do that is via masculine excellence. I'm saying in the world we live in today, it's hyper-competitive. And if you want to be the kind of man that has the choice of women to choose a good one, you need to be an excellent man. It's no longer acceptable for you to just be an average Joe or below average. You have to get up and you have to work hard and you have to be smart and interesting and you have to be charismatic and make some money and be in good shape and you have to try very hard. And unfortunately for them, if you follow that path as a man and you become successful in those realms, you end up being the kind of person who resists enslavement. You become the kind of person who wakes up and says, no, I don't believe in that. That doesn't make sense to me.
I can't imagine a better message than that.
If you want a good society. So then you have to argue and sit and say, do these people want a happy, functioning society or do they want something else?
What do you think?
I think that I would never kill myself. And I also...
Just throwing that out there?
And I also think that when you want to conquer a society, you kill the military-age males. That's what you do. And I think there's certainly a movement to ensure that there's very little resistance left inside of the number one demographic, which is required to resist oppression, which are military-age males. And they don't want those kind of people waking up with any kind of self-respect or standards, or to say, no, I don't accept this. I do not need a 9th injection. They don't want that. They want you to sit and say, I don't need it, but the news said so, oh well.
So in the one interview that you and I did, you had a line that I've been thinking about ever since. I thought it was so interesting. I'd never thought of it before. You said that a lot of people went along with the vax, and that you didn't judge them because facts change. But now that we know that a lot of what we were told was wrong and some of it was a lie, it is a requirement of your own dignity, of your own self-respect to say so.
Completely. And people should apologize. I really do believe. And I have nothing against the people who fell for the propaganda, fell for the programming, and took the vaccine.
Yes, I agree.
Fine. But you should wake up and say, I was fooled. I've learned my lesson. I will not be fooled again. But if you were fooled by the MSM and took the injection and you continue to be fooled and you have not self-reflected and you have not realized that they lied to you the entire way and you now believe the new bunch of lies that are all over the television, then there's something wrong with you.
Or you don't care that you were lied to.
You don't care that you were lied to because I think a lot of this is actually genuinely cowardice. I think it's a very easy worldview. The life is easier if you accept the news tells the truth.
Yes.
Everything they want me to believe is true. Everything's nice and simple. Good guys, bad guys, doop-de-doop-de-doo. And if you want to actually wake up, it takes a degree of bravery because then you have to destroy your entire worldview, everything you've ever understood and everything you're told, and you have to really look at the world and go, oh, this is a mess. And that takes bravery. And once again, that's why they don't want men to be brave. They want you to sit there and go, oh, it's easier if just, CNN said, so it must be true. And it's cowardice. And they're trying to instill cowardice in all of us. That's what they're trying very hard to do. And I think even just me as a person, the people who hate me, my detractors who dislike me so much, even if I say nothing, I just turn up, big, bald, strong, fast car. It's just me. I'm like the enemy to them because I symbolize men who don't comply. And not don't comply in a negative law-breaking way, but don't comply if we don't agree with that or we don't see common sense in that, we're going to politely decline. And that's simply not allowed. I want everyone to know that. One, I would never kill myself. And two, I think that as a man, there's always going to be a degree of pain and suffering in your journey. I don't think you're ever going to become a successful man or be good at being a man without pain and suffering. And there's many times in my life where something terrible happened to me, and at the time, if I could change it, I would have. But retrospectively, you kind of look back and go, you know what, that was formulative for me.
That's right.
That is what God decided I needed to become who I became.
That's such a profoundly different worldview from the one that we're presented with, I think. Yeah. Do you think that's maybe the division in the West between people who see those forces at work and those who don't?
I think the West is actually split between people who think and people who don't think at all. I think the people, there's no such thing as these two opposing worldviews. I think people believe there's worldview A and worldview B. I disagree with that. I think there's worldview A, the good guys, which are primarily people who do believe in God, do have parameters, do believe in standards, do believe in self-respect, do know how to say no. And there's worldview B, which changes day by day, based on what they're told, which means they have no real worldview at all. They just repeat. And they have no standards and they have no parameters. There's nothing you can tell them that will make them wake up and go, that's wrong, because they have no inherent morality. So you can say bestiality is accepted and encouraged now. It's good for you for climate change. And they'll sit there and go, oh, for climate change? Oh, well, off we go. And they'll just do it. So I think you have a camp of people who think, and you have a camp of people who repeat. And I don't think there's actually the opposing side to the good, I don't think function as a thinking populace at all. I think they simply repeat.
It feels like the conflict between those two groups is getting more intense.
It's certainly getting more intense. And it was interesting for me because, and I want to be an optimist, but I lost so much faith in humanity during COVID. If you would have told me how COVID would have gone down before COVID, I'd say, no way. We're not that bad. I thought the people aren't that dumb. But when I experienced COVID, it's actually scary. You see how the Nazis managed to do what they did. You see how they managed to put people in concentration camps. You see it. And I had a very unique view of COVID because in the first days of COVID, when people were falling over in China and the Italian hospitals were overrun, at the height of the panic, when most people believed, because it was the very beginning, early stages, my brother and I had a very logical conversation and said, we're two military-aged men in very good physical condition. If we die of this, the world's over. So we found the only two countries that were open, which were Sweden and Belarus. We had just been to Belarus. This is before the Ukraine war. We'd just been there. We decided to try Sweden. So for the first 3 months of COVID, during the height of lockdowns, when Florida was closed, when it was absolute...
I remember.
Yeah, when it was the craziest lockdowns globally, me and Tristan are in Sweden in absolute freedom. They had no restrictions, no masks, no vaccine passports, no social distancing, nightclubs are full, restaurants are open, perfectly complete normal society. Nobody talks about this anymore. Nobody talks about, wait, Sweden never did a thing. People ignored their own eyes. That's the scariest thing about everything, is that they can get to a level where, with the media machine, where people will genuinely ignore their own eyes. I don't understand how you can get people so brainwashed that they will see that the sky is blue, and then they'll watch that the sky is green, and then they'll look at it again and go, the sky's green. It's crazy to me, but COVID proves they can do that. And that's why the war is getting so intense, because the principled people are saying, how can you still believe in the things that you're saying? Here is all the logical, empirical evidence that that is a lie. But these people are ideologically brainwashed, and they don't want to take enough. They don't have the bravery it takes to wake up and accept that they're being lied to. So they'd rather just, to the end of time, repeat what they're told. And it becomes more and more intense as it becomes more and more ridiculous. If they don't like your views and you're inspiring millions of people to resist slave programming, you become a threat.
You can't send a guy to jail because you disagree with him.
You shouldn't. But even before I went to jail, the members of parliament in the UK were talking about me and what a dangerous role model I am for young boys. So they launched this initiative inside of British schools to ban me. My name can't be said inside of any British school. And members of parliament were standing up in parliament saying, Andrew Tate is dangerous. He's encouraging young boys to have misogynistic views, because I'm literally telling young men to go to the gym and to stand up for themselves and believe in themselves and believe in something. And by extension, you look at some of the sexual education books these children are being given, which I believe at age 9, I don't think a child needs to learn about anal sex or any of these things.
Probably not.
Yeah, probably not. So they're pushing that to the children, but I'm banned.
Well, they're also pushing weed and video games on boys.
Oh, completely. And you can listen to rap music about killing people all day long. And there's a whole, and Lil Nas, he can have sex with the devil in his music videos. That's fine. But I'm dangerous for saying go to the gym. It's really interesting to me about what's happening because we're talking about masculinity and men who say no and men who stand up. But there has to be balance, right? Yeah. Everywhere in the world, there has to be power balances. If there's not a balance in power, there's going to be a vacuum and that's going to be filled. If you neuter the native population of men, if you destroy their mentality to resist, if you tell them that every single thing about them masculine is wrong and you basically feminize and unicate them, turn them into eunuchs, and then you import high testosterone men from the third world who don't believe any of this garbage, who grew up in a society where they understand the only way to succeed is to be a fearsome predator to a degree. What do you think is going to happen? And this is exactly what's happening with migration. The problem with migration specifically is that there's no native masculine populace.
What is the matrix?
Good question. I guess some Americans call it the deep state, but I like to look at it in a more global way. When I say the matrix, I think there are certain agendas which are being pushed. I think the media machine and the judicial systems of the world work together hand in hand. I think the goal is to control people's minds to a point where they don't discuss anything that's important. The reason I use the matrix is because I've watched that movie a few times and it has so many similarities to the... Have you seen the movie?
No.
You've never seen the movie The Matrix?
No, I don't watch any movie. I don't want to talk about it on camera. No, I'm very dyslexic and it's hard for me to watch video.
Got it.
Honestly.
Understood. But there's so many similarities, and the basic premise is that humans' minds are controlled and put inside of a false reality so that their body heat can be manifested for the machines. And I don't think it's much different to reality. Our minds are controlled. We're put in a false version of reality. We're told things aren't true. We're arguing over things that don't matter. We're observing a false version of events. And the goal of it is just to distract us long enough for our bodies to be used for the machines, the soulless. And I think it's pretty similar. But there are agents inside of the matrix, and the idea of the agent, the purpose of the agent is to make sure that nobody understands how the matrix really works and to wake anybody's mind up. They want to keep you asleep. And any person can become an agent at any time. If they're not unplugged, if their mind is not free, they can become an agent, and their job is to keep you asleep. And you see agents all the time. COVID awoken me to agents. When I would sit and talk to somebody and they seemed perfectly rational and normal until I mentioned COVID, and then they'd fully change. No, it's dangerous. No, what do you mean? What do you mean? Are you crazy? My grandma got sick. And they became an agent instantly and started repeating the news to me. And I was like, your grandma got sick. How old is she? 97? Interesting. Oh, I better lock myself in my house then. Dumbass. So agents exist and the matrix exists, and I think most people's version of the world is a false one. The idea and the world that most people have in their mind and how society functions and how all these things function, I genuinely believe is completely false. I think they've all been lied to. I don't think anybody understands how any of the world works. And I try and use some very simple, very simple analogies to wake people up. I said to one of my friends once, I said, if me and you could play video games for $10,000 and you could cheat, would you cheat? He goes, well, no. I was like, if I was whooping your ass and it was 10 grand a game and you could cheat, would you cheat? He goes, yeah. I was like, all right, so you accept that people cheat to win in a video game for a menial amount of money. You think they're not going to cheat for something that matters?
Yeah. I think
they're not going to cheat for something important? You understand what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I would never kill myself.
Why do you think support for the war in Ukraine, support for Ukraine's side in the war against Russia, support for a war against Russia in the West, is kind of the bottom line issue for the people who run the US government and for the American media? Why? I mean, I guess you could argue about it, but there isn't an argument about it in the United States. There's a position, and anyone who doesn't hold it is attacked and punished. Why? Why is that so important?
Well, the first thing I think we should all do is I think we should all give Putin credit for curing COVID, right? Because when his invasion happened, COVID went away.
So thought about that.
Think about it. It's almost to the day. So we have to give him some credit at least for doing that. He may be the bad guy of the world, but at least he cured COVID for everybody, nearly instantly.
Fair.
Thank you, President Putin. But I understand very well, I like to believe what's happening with Ukraine and Russia. And what I will say to the people who are watching this at home is that if you are naive enough to believe that there are good guys and bad guys, in wars, and it's as simple as good and bad, and that the bad guys are crazy and the good guys want freedom, then you need to do a little bit more investigation into what's really happening. And when you look at the vested interest of any country or any person...
Can I just ask you to pause and just comment? That's the truest thing, what you just said. That is and anyone who doesn't understand that should shut the fuck up. And I mean it. Having seen war, anyone who's telling you that it's Churchill versus Hitler is an idiot.
Well, I'll give you an example. When my father was still alive,
Excuse me.
Yeah, no, it's true. When my father was still alive, my father died 6 or 7 years ago. I was a lot younger. The war in Afghanistan was going on.
He died 6 or 7 years ago. How old was he?
56.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, he died. But the war in Afghanistan was going on. And I remember asking my dad, saying, why do the Taliban even fight and resist the American war machine? They don't stand a chance. Like, why are these terrorists even fighting against the American war machine? And my dad said, they're fighting for their way of life. They want their wife, and they want their children, and they want their society and their language, and they don't want pride flags, and they don't want American bullshit, and they don't want to be told what to do. And they're fighting to be a culture and be a people which is independent in and of itself. Like, they're not the bad guys you think they are. They're people who are like, why are you here? What do you want? We don't agree with that. That's against our holy book. Fuck off. Right? So even there's no such thing as good and bad in any war. And people.
Who was your father?
My father was a chess master. He worked for the CIA when he was a linguist for the CIA, and then he was
American.
He was discharged, and for a story I won't tell, but he was a chess master, and it's very interesting. I encourage people to look at his Twitter. He still has Twitter at Tate Terrific, and everything he was talking about 11 years ago is so important now. 11 years ago, no one cared about. We had the Donbass in 2014. People cared.
Yes.
People cared a bit. But he predicted the future. You want to see how chess players can see the future? Read his Twitter. Everything from LGBTQ, why they need your kids because they can't have their own, to the war that's coming and how Europe's going to have an energy crisis, to the letter. It's all on his Twitter. It's amazing to read. It's like you could tell the future. 10 years ago, no one talked about any of this stuff. And you just have to be critically thinking. And then after you're critically thinking, you have to be brave enough. And this is the real pandemic of the world, is cowardice. You have to be brave enough to look around you and realize, everything was a trick. Everything was a lie.
But why not be a coward? I mean, it's just a lot easier, right?
Well, it used to be. This is the thing that's interesting. I would actually argue in the 1950s and 60s, if you were to agree with every single narrative and obey every single law and do exactly what you were supposed to do and pay your taxes, etc., you'd at least get a wife who respected you. You'd at least have children who could go to school without being indoctrinated to a degree. Yeah. You could have a nice house. You could have a pickup truck. You could have a pretty good life if you just followed the rules.
Yes.
I don't think that's true anymore. I think that if you are a man especially, and this is what I talk about masculine issues. If you're a man who is born and you decide to do exactly as you're told, you're going to end up depressed, in debt, working a job that you hate, with a wife who doesn't respect you, with kids who don't listen to you, in a house you don't own, until she leaves you, and then you contemplate suicide a while. And maybe you might find some purpose towards the end, enough to survive and pay your taxes, and then you're gone. I don't think a man who just follows the programming is going to find any happiness. But they don't care.